Metal coins with everything for everyone. Bigger is bigger is bigger is better. Okay, that got a little dark a little quick.
Hey, it's Chris. We are doing one of my favorite videos, February's look back. February's hyped. Where are they now? February's, are they really as good as they were projected to be, supposed to be? Are they still as good as they were when you got them because the hotness and the hype wears off? Yeah, we're doing it, right? 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024's biggest crowdfunding projects. Where are they now? Let's go. And full disclaimer, 22 games. We're talking about 22 games over these 4 years. A little bit of all over the place. We'll start with 2021 because 2021 was a very interesting one in the sense that the best game that may have come from February 2021 was not actually a base game of anything at this point. It was actually the Root Marauder expansion, right? And arguably, if you believe Board Game Geek, this is the best rated expansion for Root at the time of me filming this, numbers wise, 8.8 rating overall. More than Underworld, more than Riverfolk, anything else along those lines, the Clockwork ones, all of those have a lesser rating, even the Vagabonds. So is this truly the best one? And with this came the Lord of the Hundreds and Keepers in Iron. I am an owner. Casual competitive play. It just reminds me of the Homeland expansion when they had that little graphic up. Every expansion is awesome at every player count graphic. It's fine. New power combinations, though, that you're going to have alongside of it. I haven't played it enough to give you my opinion on it, right? But Root, like any other asymmetric game in this sense, is you find a faction that you love, you hope you buy it in the first box that you can get, and that you don't have a bunch of other, well, factions that just don't appeal to you whatsoever. And this might be one of the hardest games to get played and really enjoy it to its fullest extent, given the overhead and the dynamics of having to know what other people are doing or trying to do at all times. So is it a pipe dream for this game to be on my family's rotation list when my kids get a little older? Abso-freaking-lutely. Is it one of the only games in my collection that I have ever bought, sold, and bought again? Yes. Should I have done that? To be determined at this point. But that is probably by far and away the biggest one from February 2021. One of the biggest ones February in the past 4 years as a whole. The next one is actually a really interesting one, and I had to go look this up because I wasn't quite sure where this was going to fall with Zombicide, Undead, or Alive, right? We've just seen the recent delivery of White Death with the other previous color iterations of, you know, black whatever and green who's its what's its, and all of those iterations. But Undead or Alive, as the spaghetti western style of second edition, if you will, is ranked 1600 overall, which again, the looking up of this that I had to do was, you know, to say that where this falls was objectively kind of not easy. Is this better or worse? And, you know, similarly, as I was just talking about the Root expansion, right? People are going to argue in the comment section down below. I guarantee that that's not the best Root expansion, and I prefer this Root expansion because of XYZ and XYZ and ABC and CBA and ZYX. Because the similar overlap happens with Zombicide, right? You get your flavor, you get your slight twist. But I'll make the argument, and I would say that the rankings maybe back me up on this, that these second edition flavorings, and even the first edition flavorings, they have just these minor twists. And I think Green Horde and Black Plague are a little bit nostalgia based, but second edition is the go-to. This is what you get, right? There's a reason it's ranked as the best one in the 500s, but still the 500s. CMON has a lot of other games that are significantly higher than that in this same realm. The next Zombicide after that is actually Marvel Zombies. And I would make the argument it's going to remain higher than Undead or Alive because it does something different. It doesn't just rest on the laurels of the previous iterations of colored Zombicides that we've seen. And I think that, along with, you know, what Undead or Alive did, just a slight twist of things, isn't enough to entice people anymore. Part of that is obviously the Marvel sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I like Marvel in general, but they actually changed the dynamics and the, well, mechanics that kind of went along with some of that. And high risk, high reward. But that's also why I'd make the argument that Massive Darkness 2 is higher than every other Zombicide except for the base 2nd edition at this point. Because it is something more improved upon than, again, resting on the laurels of what Massive Darkness 1 did. Because people weren't happy with that, and they said, we will make it better. We haven't seen that with Zombicide, and that was the reason people went in on 2 for Massive Darkness, but maybe not as much with getting a 2nd or 3rd Zombicide. It's not stopping printing money, so I guarantee we might even have another one before the end of 2025. And the last 2 here are kind of, again, all over the place. Ragnarocks from Grey Fox Games as a sort of more unique version, more modern version attempt at Santorini, giving me a more flat level with rocks and cordoning off areas with the same sort of Greek god-esque powers, only in the form of Norse gods this time. It just never has quite clicked home, right? The grab you factor of Santorini has never been there with Ragnarok's. The overproduction, overly large size pieces in this ugly, ugly, ugly plastic, which just does not work aesthetically well. It doesn't work practically well. And I think that that's hurt the gameplay, because I'm not going to say that the gameplay is bad, but it's also one that I just kind of go, meh. I mean, somehow it's the 111th ranked game abstract on Board Game Geek, and it's sitting at 3,900 overall. But it's sort of one of those games, I think either you really love it as an abstract person, or it just doesn't fit the mold of what you want whatsoever, because it's sitting with a 7.0 rating. That's not terribly great, right? Maybe better than Santorini, New York, but just doesn't quite capture the magic that Santorini did the first time it came around previously as well, too. So I don't think you're going to see this one climb any higher. I've been clamoring to sell my copy, no interest in keeping it. So I think I see a lot of that on the secondary market. The last one up here is, again, surprising sort of situation here with Kingdom Rush with the Elemental Uprising expansion from Lucky Duck, which raised less money as a 2.0, arguably better version of Kingdom Rush than the first time around. And I made the argument in the past, and I have been told that I am wrong, that the reason that it earned less money was not because it had anything to do with the gamefound and the Kickstarter walk-up that gamefound just doesn't have, but just because, right? And this is a better version of it, but it's still this min-max poured over from a video game side of things that works well at like a 1, maybe 2 player count, way too much downtime, way too much upkeep at the higher player counts, and still, again, for me, just as a not puzzle person, a little bit too much min-max in that way. Not bad by any means, but it's very difficult as well. And those combination of things didn't make it as satisfying for me personally. And I don't think that that's necessarily representative of where it's at ranking wise at the 5400s, because it only has 240 rankings on Board Game Geek in general with the standalone expansion. The base game, the original, it has 2400 ratings and sits in the 1500th spot or so at the time of me filming this. So it's better than the first one, but the numbers and the ratings don't really reflect that fully, because I just don't think it's really stayed on people's radars in the same sense. So I don't know. Will we see another? Is it that adaptable or variable that you can do this? I think the system is clever, but again, it's one of those where I just feel like, as clever and unique as it is compared to anything else I've seen, because there really isn't anything else to directly compare it to, it just also, in the same way that Ragnarok's was like Santorini, this just never quite clicked home, touching base with myself, and I'm imagining maybe that's why the lack thereof of significant showings elsewhere with other people as well.
You know what makes this easy? Doing it a second time! Not like I had errors doing this video the first time around and it totally got scrapped. Okay, so 2022, right? Looking back at 2022. Okay, we have 8 games on the list of things, right? The first and the biggest winner of 2022 at this point, of almost all the crowdfunding games in 2022, but especially easily of February of the last 4 years running at the point of me filming this, is Earth. Earth, what's going to unseed Earth? Maybe one of the ones from 2024 that got an expansion, but we'll get there in a minute. what we're talking about here is more Earth, and we're having abundance be delivered with the expansion content. And, this is the top 200 board games of all time at this point. So this thing has had a meteoric rise. It's an engine tableau building card mess layout that you can min-max to your preference and your choosing. So, right? Is it your tableau builder? Do you care about the Earth and the environment themes that we're seeing run amok in the last year and a half or so? Because if some is good, more is more, as we're seeing with all the dual games, which we'll talk about in the next news video as well. So, it's the standard bearer at this point. It is the comparison to which a lot of others are going to be compared. And to raise a freaking about $1 million on crowdfunding for a card game with no miniatures and very few luxifications, is fantastic. So kudos where kudos is due. Now, secondly, also in 2022, we saw from Orange Nebula, more recently crowdfunded, Vestige, Vindication in Space. You have their, I don't want to say their flagship, but it's kind of the one that put them on a lot of people's maps of Unsettled, right? And Unsettled, the base game, is sort of like, I always make this comparison, how apt or true it is. You can let me know down below. Don't actually let me know, because it's probably not terribly good. But it's like ISS Vanguard is the Amerithrash sort of spacefaring, explorative, Star Trek-esque, whatever you want to call it, on that side. I always think of Unsettled as being a slightly more Euro cooperative version of this, only if you had now, 10 different planetary expansions, a couple modules to go along with it. Yeah, I know it's like 7 or 8, but I'm being facetious. And so, right, this is what you're getting. Do you want more of it? And, with their last two, Spirit, Fire, and Vestige, right? Like, it's going to be a competition to see which one gets delivered first. So I don't think there's anything wrong with this, but it's like your flip flavor of United or Champions or anything Marvel related or expansion galores, right? If you got some, you've probably got too many. And at the same time, you can't stop yourself from getting more. So was this your flavor? And is this truly top 500? Just going to throw that out there. I don't have a freaking clue. Though, this next one comes with a slight gimmick. And I say gimmick, and you immediately, I know, because I am trained the same way, when you hear gimmick, you go negative, horrible, stupid, not going to stand the test of time. But Rolling Heights hasn't really ever been done in this way, and it hasn't been duplicated. Because you're literally rolling your freaking meeples, which on surface value is an incredibly stupid concept. But it's just the kind of stupid that your boy loves at times, right? Like, there's a reason The Loop is one of my favorite games. It's just dropping cubes down a random thing and having them splay everywhere and causing you to lose all the time, right? And so Rolling Heights is the same thing. Like, I'm rolling meeples to determine how well I'm going to get my resources in order to build my city as I'm going along. That sounds horrible, and it's fun. The only downside I'd say is that if you were a crowdfunding backer, yeah, you kind of didn't get the best deal, because the one thing I'll say about AEG is that if you are patient with them, and maybe this goes to say that if you want to support them on crowdfunding, you do this, but if you also want to support them at retail, like almost once a year, the past 2 or 3 years, they've had this like 40-50% off everything in their store, pretty much, on like a couple days in like April, May-ish. And I picked up the whole bundle, the whole kit and caboodle, as they say in the old-timey things, including the expansion and the little crowdfunding extra. And it was, including shipping, less than the cost of the pledge without shipping on crowdfunding. Is it a fun game? Yeah. Am I getting rid of it anytime soon? No. At the same time, this is the stupid fun, right? Like, I can't tell you the last time I played it either. And that's a plethora of having too many games in the first place. But it's just kind of unique of rolling them, but pushing your luck and getting skyscrapers in the form of little tiles. I mean, it works for what it is, and that's why it sits at a very, very respectable 1,500 right now. Because again, anything under like 2,000s, folks, is really pretty freaking sweet. Which leads me to the next one at 3,500 of Tidal Blades 2, the conundrum that was presented to a lot of people at the end of 2024. Because this is what happens when these games deliver at the tail end of 2024, is that some people get them, play them smackingly through as much as they can to get them on their lists of the bests of best, right? But then a lot of it also falls, into the next year. And then what do you do? Because technically it delivered that year, but you didn't actually get to play it a whole bunch that year. So do you include it in that year? Do you not include it on the next year's? And you see this very split dichotomy, because then you also have the purists out there that are saying, well, Chris, you can't have a game from 2023 on your best of 2024 list or your top 10 games from 2024. I get nailed about that every single year, right? Like this past year, I had Veil of Eternity on my list. Well, it was technically, Chris, a 2023 game. So, yeah, but it wasn't widely available to the general public until 2024 on North America, at least. So similarly with this. And again, I don't know what to make of this. A lot of people had this as one of their top games, the ones that played it and played it a ton. One of the best dungeon crawlers. I mean, this is right up there at the underrated and the underappreciated Fate Forge Chronicles of Khan, which is currently crowdfunding again at the time of me filming this, as people loved these games that love these games. The question I have with this, and why I can see this rising meteorically up or also stagnating, is not because it's a bad game. Because again, I think it's like I just alluded to, right? And I'll put this a different way. It's a dungeon crawl fanatics dungeon crawl, if you will. Just like Fate Forge, right? Like, you want a little bit more of a streamlined approach. It's giving you something different. This grid-based layout, the not smash them up, grab them, bounce them all over the place, but doing something unique in terms of the quests and objectives as a scenario-based system is going to provide to you. But it's probably not the one that you go, hey, Chris, which one should I start with? Hey, Chris, which one should I get next? Hey, Chris, which one is like a Japanese RPG game? Hey, Chris, which one is going, right? Like, that's where this one and Fate Forge both kind of fall off a little bit. I would make the argument right now. And that's what I'm saying is I could see that continue to be the trend. I could also see that breaking down walls and barriers and opening a lot of doors and getting a lot more groundswell as well. And I have no freaking metric clue because it's sitting at 3,500 or 300 ratings on Board Game Geek. So time will tell. And speaking of time will telling on this next one, Tindaya, right? Pleasing the gods, sacrificing souls of your Euro game masters in a cooperative and competitive and solo mode. And I remember this one actually drumming up a significant amount of hype when it came to crowdfunding. And it was labeled the next Spirit Island. It's so much like Spirit Island. We haven't seen any games like that where people say, it looks like Blood Rage. Or have we seen stuff like that? And guess what, folks? Guess what? Spoilers, doesn't always turn out like the one you're comparing it to, especially when we're talking about preview copies and people getting paid to say quotes like that get them on the page. Whew. Okay, I said what I said. And truth be told, it's got a much heavier weight rating, complexity, heavy-wise, than Spirit Island. It's over a 4. And again, not going to say bad things, but like from the comments I'm seeing and the stuff I've read, it's just too much. And it doesn't all cohesively fit together. It's not a bad thematic situation or approach, but it just seems to be one of those where people go, yeah, I mean, you tried to do it. And this is sort of the motto of crowdfunding nowadays. People are no longer saying, should I do it? They're saying, can I do it, Chris? I shouldn't do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Screw you. Ha! Bigger is better. Metal coins with everything for everyone. And that's kind of what I feel like this was mechanistically, right? I would rather add one or two of these mechanisms with a modular expansion content or additional instead of having it just so much thrown at once. Because when you've got so many moving parts, as they say, right? The more moving parts you have, the more chances you have to have things break. And if you have 16 different ways of doing things, only one or two of them has to be off enough to make you have a bad taste in your mouth in the game. And as I saw this comment posted earlier elsewhere, even on Reddit, and I don't always agree with this, but it's the sentiment now when I look around this room and when you look around or when you think of games, you go, and the comment was in response to, hey, do you give games a second chance? Or how many chances do you give games before you decide? You know what? And the truth of it is, a lot of the times, first impressions, folks, it's true in real life and it's true on this side of things as well. It shouldn't be always, but it is, and that's where Tindaya is as well. Now we jump up to the 8,000s because Iron Forest, as the spiritual, mechanical, mech shooting up Ice Cool successor, right? Yeah, Ice Cool. We went from penguins to shoot 'em up mechs. As a next level, haha, excuse the pun in a second, you'll understand why, flicking game. because you literally have two separate levels that you're flicking back and forth from in order to knock out your opponent's mechs from Brain Games. So 2 to 4 players, opposing teams, Animal Clans versus the Iron Force, and you can, well, destroy their mechs, collect objects and weapons, and activate to power up to destroy the other person. I don't know, right? Speak of niche within a niche, within a niche, within a niche, within a niche, within a niche. But, I mean, the people that love it, love it. Is it going to be of interest to you? I think the problem with a game like this is that what you run into often is the variable skill level. If you have people that are just not used to playing this game, that aren't good dexterous people like myself, or you've got people that have played it, a dozen times and someone picks it up as a newbie that is just kind of whatever, then the gap in terms of is going to be way too much and be too much off-putting, which is why then people aren't going to want to go back to it potentially. But if you want it, I mean, go for it, I guess, from that aspect. Then, again, to be determined, to be delivered. Maybe we'll have it by the end of 2025. I love them, but they're biting off a lot right now into the unknown. And Kingdoms Forlorn, Dragons, Devils, and Kings. A narrative-heavier version, slightly more mechanically heavy as well, version of their Dark King Arthur style Aeon Trespass Odyssey. I'm saying that just as the comparison to their game, not as a mechanistic approach, even though they use a similar battling system with this one. And we just don't know at this point, right? We just don't know. Now, I, truth be told, have said this several times, several places, many different ways, that I am branching away from some of the more narrative-heavy driven games like this. Like, sometimes I just want to slash, bash, smash, and crash. And I didn't even need to take 2 takes to say that one. So that's what I'm leaning towards, right? With your Cthulhu Death May Dies, with your Massive Darkness 2s, with your anything along those lines, even your Metal Gear Solids. And I don't know why I'm choosing all these CMON games, but that sort of thing where I don't need to have 1,000 different narrative issues. I mean, like, I found myself even skipping over a lot of narrative text on games that don't even require a ton of it to be read in the first place nowadays. So I'm still incredibly interested in this, but I think it's going to be an interesting test to see, because a lot of people have Aeon Trespass Odyssey that are getting this. A lot of people are choosing one over the other. Are they going to be happy with that choice? A lot of people then also went on their latest one as well too. So which one is your flavor, and are they going to be drastically different enough that you can justify reasonably to your significant other that they are all different enough to own all 3. So to be determined at this point, so we'll see. The last one I have to throw out there, because I don't know why Board Game Geek doesn't have this ranked. Maybe they have too many versions in the library already, so they decided not to rank one of the other previous top games of all time in 51st State. But the 51st State Ultimate Edition and the 51st State Ultimate Edition Gamefound Edition on Board Game Geek don't actually have rankings, despite the hundreds and hundreds of ratings that they have, and actually 1,500 ratings for the base game without the exclusives. And that's the problem, right? With these exclusives, these tiny things, like I was just talking about previously last year with Dead Cells, right? This FOMO of, I need these little Kickstarter, Game Start exclusives that are going to be freaking awesome. And, when you look at even an Ultimate Edition like this, which makes you wonder if they're actually going to have more of it come out and make it like the Mage Knight situation, where it's really the Ultimate Edition is the penultimate edition because we can't stop making stuff for it because it's actually a huge moneymaker for us in the first place. And you go, I don't actually need that stuff because I've already got way too much content in here to be incorporated in the first place. And it's just a completionist FOMO rather than an actual, I'm going to use this stuff because the actual Ultimate Edition comes with 4 expansions in the first place situation. So this is also, truth be told, this is, one of my honest confessions on Legion of Games confessional channel, that I have actually never played 51st Ultimate Edition. I've never played 51st State anything. And so I probably should. I've had a few attempting trades in the past, but it's never really panned out. And I just probably should at some point, but I probably will, but not anytime soon either. So one of those that, awesome, but also, we'll see. Now we'll hop over to 2023 because 2 of these 3 have actually already been delivered, right? We have a couple from 2022 that aren't delivered, but the 2023s are, and a couple of the 2024s are as well. Like, right? Crowdfunding. So first up, actually, and we're only covering 3 brief ones here, Sail from Allplay. 2-player trick-taking cooperative game, very hard, very min-max, And, truth be told, one that I wanted to love more than I loved. I just didn't enjoy it. Playing with my wife, neither of us was like, wow, this is fantastic. And we like trick-taking games. We like cooperative. We like a little bit harder. But it just fell flat. And I'm not sure where the fall flat was. And I've always wanted to go back to it like a fifth time and try it again. And I may have my opportunity to do that because they just recently announced Sail Legacy coming from Allplay, maybe even later in 2025. So we'll see if you can avoid the Kraken and navigate these tricky waters. Because, I mean, it's a very clever system, but it's ultimately, I think, well, it's good. But 2-player cooperative trick-taking games are hard to do, and again, like, trick-taking games are hit or miss for me because I should love them more than I do sometimes, and I just don't always. So that was the first up. And then 4600s we're dropping all the way down to because Bezier threw another Mad King Ludwig game at us in the form of blueprints as the roll and write version of things. Again, get your colored pencils on crowdfunding. But it's a flip and sketch your blueprints for the rooms instead of doing it with tiles. Again, one of those games that got the roll and write treatment, as we're seeing all of the dual treatments going on right now for games that are already capable of playing at 2 people, but they decided to follow the trend and, do it that way. Is it good? I don't know. I don't typically find that these overwhelmingly based off of previous games roll and writes duels are as consistent as I'd like, although the duels have been more consistent, I would argue, than the roll and writes comparatively to their counterparts predecessors. So it's sitting in the 4600s. And then the last one here is yet to be delivered, and that's Founders from This Way, sort of the different ice tile laying version of things, only they went with an abstract nature of these tile laying this time instead of the Euro worker placement. And it's incredibly brain-burny, abstracty, and analysis paralysis driven as a tile layer, offering you different ways to score these tiles and different ways to play them, and having hidden alliances with 2 players that don't even know that they're necessarily allied. So it's definitely doing something different. And don't be fooled by the aesthetic. Don't be fooled by the initial overarchingness of it. It reminds me of Factory Funner, if you're ever familiar with that game. Again, like, super simple concept. It says 30 to 45 minutes. If you're playing this with a lot of players, you could easily eclipse the hour mark that they say is at the high end of things with this because of the analysis paralysis of putting these tiles down and having to pattern match in a very unique, abstract way. I covered it on the channel. I was very impressed, but that was my biggest takeaway, is I'm not sure it's going to be the easiest at the table for me personally because of how complex it potentially is. And that, right, is very quick, very short and sweet, 2023. Hop, skip, and jump over to 2024, and we're hitting up straight up, right? One that already delivered in 2024 after it ran in 2024, which I always give freaking kudos about, which is I'm loving to see all the time, and that's Thunder Road freaking Vendetta and the Carnival of Chaos expansion. You want Mad Max Road Rally Derby style things? Well, you pick up this, you get your Chop Shop expansion, you say screw it to the rest of them, you don't even need the Maximum Chrome Edition, and you'll be set. That's my recommendation. I stand by it. This is my favorite racing game out there. Yes, I like this over Heat Pedal to the Metal, not because Heat Pedal to the Metal is bad, but just because, I mean, this is me, right? Chaos, craziness, and just cool factor. And I eat crow every time I talk about this because I didn't think it was going to be that good. I skipped on the first crowdfunding campaign and bought it on the market when Maximum Chrome came to retailers between the first and second campaign. So that's all I need to say about that aspect. The only other big one that's been delivered at this point from 2024 is Inferno from Red Moho and Grand Gamers Guild. And this was another in the lines of this, all of a sudden Dante's Inferno getting like 2 or 3 games within like a month span on crowdfunding. Again, it's got 1,100 ratings, 8.1 rating overall, but it's more of the Euro worker placement as compared to Dante's Inferno, which we'll talk about in a second from CGS, because this has 2 different phases that you're sort of navigating through the circles of hell, getting your points as you guide through these corresponding circles, and then the second phase of things where you're choosing the actions and then, exposing a sinner who's executed, and then their soul is led to hell, and then you get to advance on the hell registry, keeping track of the souls that you've supplied. Okay, that got a little dark a little quick, but you're getting to the end, and when Dante reaches the gate that leads into purgatory, that game ends, and you get the most victory points, you win. So, Gren, like, it seems to be very, very well received as a little bit of a slightly heavier worker placement, and surprisingly a 3.5 rating. So I'm really intrigued to kind of see how this one will pan out, because if you had asked me at the time of crowdfunding when these were almost like, I think, literally overlapping, I would have said this was going to be much less interesting to me, much less successful. And you know what? Again, this was the one I'd be happy to eat crow on from that aspect. So we'll see where this goes. The other one that's been delivered at this point in the process, at least, of is Ascending Empires from Play to Z with their Zenith edition as a dexterity flicking 4X spacefaring sandbox game. And again, like those words and those adjectives together just spark something within me. At the same time, from what the comments I've read they're kind of all over the place, right? Like, again, the skill, just like I was talking about previously with Iron Forest, is going to be the big make it or break it. Because if the skill level is going to be that much drastically different between any of the players, this game could fall pretty flat in that way as well. And again, like I worry about a 4X situation with this combination. And is it going to capture the 4X magic with this unique mechanism? Sort of like a Catacombs, if you will, for the dungeon crawl style of things. Play to Z has some very interesting titles out, and I think this is one of them, and they're going all over the place. The other one that was in 2024 that I haven't had a chance to experience yet is YRO as a tableau-driven card combo system. And then their upcoming ones that they're collaborating with Shut Up and Sit Down to do, the remake of Dogs of War, as well as the Animal Rescue Team one. And truth be told, like Animal Rescue Team actually appeals to me much more than the other, because I'm, again, cooperative lover all over the place. So this is going to be interesting to see, because it was expensive on crowdfunding too. It was like triple digits, and it's selling for almost $120 in the retail market right now. So will you spend that much money on this style of game? It's a hard sell because of the combination of 4X and dexterity. The Venn diagram of people loving that one is not huge. And so it's like some of these others we've talked about, is that if you love it, you love it. If you don't love it, it's not going to entice you in the first place. And that's sometimes what you're waiting to see on with these when you get them. Then Pika Games, the Awakened Realms Light to Awakened Realms of Fantasia games, if you will, if that made sense, if that comparison actually worked. This was their one from crowdfunding last year that I covered as well. Very interesting dynamic of flow in terms of how you're moving these characters back and forth in and out of the village to do your worker placement and your resource management gathering. But also I worried that with all of these different mechanics, just like with Unconscious Mind, can you, again, similarly as the earlier part of the video conversation, too many mechanics, too much going on. Like, again, like Unconscious Mind, I felt like there's just one too many things. And same thing with Floe. And so, again, they talk about this dynamic, different grid-based system. I mean, they just didn't make them squares. They made them little jagged edges to illustrate the icebergs. And you actually travel your little boat around. And, I mean, it's doing some cool stuff. It's doing some nice things. But I'm hoping for some very cohesiveness in the final product that was there, but I just worry about with, again, more being more sometimes. And, you know, if you're lucky, we'll have it by the end of the year. I think they're slated for quarter 3 or quarter 4 at the time of me filming this. So we'll see how people feel, if it can really do what Unconscious Mind did. Because I think a lot of people, again, poo-pooed that. And by the time they got their hands on it, they said, oh, okay, this is as good as some of those people were talking about when they did the video impressions for the crowdfunding campaign. So take that for what you will. Then Dying Light from Glass Cannon Unplugged, the latest, or one of the latest in their video game iterations. And again, same thing, right? This is like a Zombicide on steroids, only with the steroids being the ability for your climbers or your survivors to jump and shoot around between buildings, and the zombies to do the same. Similarly as well, just with Floe, I worry during the campaign about the ease of accessibility, the setup and teardown with some of the 3D terrain. It's very nice to look at, but it's got a little bit more of that going on. And then they've also apparently streamlined some of those edges and those curves and those rough parts to make it a little bit just more easy, so that it's not so nitpicky, so it's not so much errata, so it's not so much big learning curve. And so if they can really streamline that, I kind of want to see where this one could go, because this could be like your next step up from a Zombicide with still accessibility and still name brand recognition. But we're also waiting for their previous one at the time of me filming this as well too, with Apex Legends, which is supposed to deliver this year. So is Dying Light actually going to be deliverable this year as well? I don't know. And if I was shaking a magic 8-ball right now, I would maybe be coming up with a sign that says all signs point to perhaps not. And then last up, as I alluded to a minute ago, Dante's Inferno from Creative Games Studios, the folks behind Chronicles of Drunagor, with your 3D terrain, and now splitting it up with several of the big boss battlers and narrative campaign dungeon crawls are doing, of sort of your overworld and your battling. And the overworld was really my concerning feature when I was watching some of the preview videos of people saying, oh, this is really cool. And I'm like, this is completely random flipping up of stuff. And it felt very out of my control. And I think the combat could be something special. The use of the 3D terrain is something that they love doing, especially with Chronicles of Drunagor. And the dark style of Dante's Inferno, I think, plays really well for a dungeon crawl thematic incorporation. But I worry about the branchingness of time and storylines and journeys. and the upgradableness. And then I also worry about all of the expansion content that came out with it as well, with a couple different champions and inevitable expansions that are going to come if it does well in the first place. So we'll see, but boss battling in a slightly different way. Boss battling compared to some of the more recent ones we've seen on crowdfunding already at the end of 2024 and even beginning of 2025, and the stuff still in pending limbo like Grim Coven. So how does it compare? What does it make you think of? And are you happy you got this one over a different one, I guess, at this point too? That'd be a big question mark. So there you go. That is the look back for February and where things are at. 4 years running. Boom. Your boy's covering 4 years of time in one video. It's way too long, but it's fun to talk about, and I love doing it. So hit me up on Patreon down below, and hit me up with whatever else you got. So thank you for watching. Subscribe if you're not, and stay classy. Have a great freaking fantastic day.